The most powerful people you'll never see, while the masses chase recognition, obsess over status symbols, parade their achievements across social media feeds. The truly powerful have mastered something far more valuable. They've learned to disappear. This isn't about hiding. This is about control. The kind of control that doesn't announce itself. The kind that shapes outcomes while remaining invisible to those being shaped. What you're about to discover goes against everything modern society teaches you about success. Power reveals itself in two forms. The first is obvious: titles, positions, public influence. The second operates in shadow, and it is this second form that has determined the course of empires, toppled dynasties, and shaped the world you inhabit today. Invisibility is true power. This forgotten strategy has been employed by history's most effective manipulators, advisors, and architects of change. While kings sat on thrones, those who whispered in their ears held the real authority. While generals commanded armies, strategists who never saw battle determined victories. You live in an age of performance. An age where visibility is confused with importance, where attention is mistaken for influence. This confusion creates an opportunity, one that those who understand the true nature of power have exploited for millennia. In the next 22 minutes, you'll discover why the invisible hand is stronger than the visible fist. You'll learn the psychological mechanisms that make invisibility superior to display. You'll understand how history's most powerful figures maintained control precisely by refusing recognition. And you'll see how this principle operates in your world today, in boardrooms, relationships, politics, and social hierarchies. This is not theory. This is the operational reality of power. The uncomfortable truth that achievement and recognition are inversely related at the highest levels. The Roman Empire understood something fundamental about power. The emperor sat in public view, addressed the Senate, showed his face on coins. But emperors died, often violently. The Praetorian Guard, however, these invisible powers behind the throne, they persisted. They selected emperors. They removed them. They operated outside public scrutiny, and this invisibility granted them something the emperor himself could never possess: freedom from accountability. When you occupy the spotlight, you become the target. Every action scrutinized, every decision questioned, your movements predictable because they must be public. You become trapped by your own visibility, forced to maintain appearances, to perform, to satisfy the expectations of those watching. The psychological mechanism here is ancient. Humans are threat assessment machines. We identify the visible power structure and direct our resistance, our envy, our competition toward what we can see. The CEO becomes the focus of employee resentment. The politician becomes the target of opposition. The influencer invites criticism with every post. But the advisor, the strategist, the person who shaped the decision without claiming it, they remain untouched. In your modern workplace, notice who actually determines policy. Not the executive who announces it, the invisible committee that drafted it. In your social circles, notice who shapes group decisions, not the loudest voice, the one who plants ideas in others and lets them take credit. It is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. But it is most advantageous to be neither, if you can achieve your aims without being noticed at all. Niccolò Machiavelli said this, and he understood power better than almost anyone in history. Recognize this pattern. When someone seeks your attention constantly, they're revealing their lack of real power. True influence doesn't advertise. It doesn't need to. The visible are always vulnerable. The invisible are protected by obscurity itself. Sun Tzu wrote extensively about espionage. But his most profound insight concerned not the gathering of information, but why information accumulates to those who do not seek recognition. Consider the intelligence networks of Renaissance Venice. The Council of Ten operated in complete secrecy. Citizens didn't know who served. Aristocrats lived in uncertainty about who watched them.
And precisely because of this invisibility, people talked freely, revealing their intentions, their alliances, their weaknesses. The visible authority figure hears only what people want them to hear. Subordinates filter information. Rivals provide misinformation. Everyone performs around the spotlight. But speak to someone without apparent power, someone invisible in the hierarchy. People reveal everything. They drop their guard. The assistant hears more truth than the executive. The quiet observer in the meeting room absorbs more reality than the person leading it. This operates on a fundamental cognitive bias. Humans assess threat based on perceived power. Visible power triggers our defense mechanisms. We manage our words, we calculate our responses, we present curated versions of ourselves. But the invisible, we forget they're listening, we forget they matter. In your reality, this manifests everywhere. The person taking notes in the meeting hears unfiltered reactions afterward. The friend who never dominates conversation learns everyone's secrets. The employee who doesn't compete for attention discovers the real dynamics of power before those competing ever do. Social media has intensified this dynamic. Those building public brands receive performed interactions. The person watching from the shadows, observing patterns, analyzing behaviors, they acquire the real data. They understand the system while others perform for it. The wise man speaks because he has something to say. The fool speaks because he has to say something. Plato understood this truth centuries ago, and it has never been more relevant than it is today. Your advantage lies in observation, not performance. Information is power only when others don't know you possess it. The moment you reveal what you know to gain recognition, you lose the advantage knowledge provides. Listen more. Speak less. Remain invisible while others exhaust themselves performing. Marcus Aurelius reflected deeply on this in his Meditations. Despite being emperor, he understood that receiving credit for achievement creates obligation. It generates expectation. It makes you responsible for replication. History provides countless examples of this trap. Napoleon's visible victories created impossible expectations. Each success demanded a greater one. His visibility made retreat impossible. His legend had to be maintained. This drove him to Russia, to Waterloo, to ultimate defeat. Compare this to Otto von Bismarck's strategy. He unified Germany while ensuring his king received the credit. Wilhelm I became the face of German unification. Bismarck remained the architect, free to maneuver, free from the burden of public expectation, able to admit mistakes privately because no public legend required maintenance. The psychological principle: when you claim credit, you chain yourself to that success. You must defend it, justify it, repeat it. Your identity becomes attached to past achievement, limiting your ability to adapt, to change strategy, to abandon losing positions. Those who let others take credit retain flexibility. They can pivot without explanation. They can test strategies and abandon them without public failure. They operate without the weight of reputation, which at the highest levels of power is not protection, it is imprisonment. In modern contexts, this wisdom is forgotten. Everyone scrambles for attribution. LinkedIn profiles boast of accomplishments. Performance reviews demand visible contributions. But observe the truly effective operators. They shape outcomes and let their superiors announce them. They write the speeches others deliver. They design the strategies others claim. This creates a paradox the masses cannot comprehend. The less credit you take, the more power you accumulate. Because power isn't what others acknowledge, it's what you actually control. He who knows others is wise. He who knows himself is enlightened. Lao Tzu wrote these words, and they carry a weight that most people never fully grasp. Apply this understanding. When you achieve something, ask yourself, do I need recognition, or do I need the freedom to continue operating effectively? Recognition satisfies ego. Invisibility maintains power. The moment you need others to know what you've accomplished, you've already lost the game. The Medici family understood this with exceptional clarity. They didn't rule Florence, They controlled it. They held no official title for generations. They were bankers, merchants, but they selected popes. They funded wars. They determined policy across Europe. Their competitors fought for visible positions, guild leadership, political office, public recognition. While rivals exhausted themselves in these public contests, the Medici operated through networks of obligation, debt, and favors that remained invisible to those outside their system. When you are visible, you attract challengers. Your position becomes a target. Ambitious individuals see what you have and want to take it. This is evolutionary. Humans are status-seeking creatures who identify and challenge visible hierarchy.
But you cannot challenge what you cannot see. Invisible power structures are difficult to attack because they're difficult to identify. You can't compete for a position that appears not to exist. This explains why bureaucratic power outlasts political power. The politician in office makes decisions, but the permanent bureaucracy, the invisible apparatus of government, shapes what decisions are possible. Elected officials come and go. The invisible structure remains. In your life, this principle manifests in every hierarchy. The manager who announces every decision invites questioning of those decisions. The manager who implements change without fanfare encounters less resistance. The friend who constantly asserts dominance in a social group eventually faces rebellion. The one who guides conversations without dominating them maintains indefinite influence. Competitive individuals are drawn to visible contests. They enter battlegrounds where everyone can watch and judge. This is precisely where you should not engage. The real competition isn't for what everyone can see. It's for control of what remains hidden. The greatest victory is that which requires no battle. Sun Tzu wrote this, and no statement better captures the essence of invisible power. Modern social media has created the ultimate visibility trap. Millions compete for followers, likes, recognition, exhausting themselves in an endless status game. Meanwhile, those who understand power build systems, networks, and capabilities in obscurity. They'll monetize audiences others built. They'll deploy capital others don't know they have. They'll implement strategies the visible competitors won't see coming. Let others fight for the spotlight. You control the light switch. Cicero wrote extensively about plausible deniability, though he never used those terms. He understood that in Roman politics, direct association with outcomes, especially negative ones, could be fatal. Those who operated through intermediaries survived. Those who personally claimed actions did not. Consider the structure of intelligence agencies throughout history. Operations succeed or fail, but the architects remain unknown. This isn't merely about protecting identities, it's about protecting power. When failure is public, someone must be sacrificed. When the power structure is invisible, no sacrifice is necessary. This principle extends beyond espionage. It governs all sophisticated power structures. Corporate boards implement unpopular decisions through CEOs who take the public blame. Political strategists shape policy. Their candidates announce. If policy succeeds, the candidate gets credit. If it fails, advisors simply change strategy without public consequence. The psychological mechanism operates on attribution theory. Humans need someone to blame, someone to credit. We're storytelling creatures who require visible agents in our narratives. When outcomes lack obvious authors, we settle on whoever is most visible, even if they were merely the messenger. This creates asymmetric accountability. The visible figure shoulders responsibility for decisions they didn't make. The invisible architect escapes accountability for decisions they did make. This isn't deception. This is understanding how human cognition attributes causation. In modern applications, this appears everywhere. The person who proposes an idea in a meeting owns it. If it fails, they're blamed. The person who shaped the idea before the meeting, but let someone else propose it. They remain unattached to the outcome. If it succeeds, they can quietly claim influence. If it fails, they never suggested it publicly. Professional environments intensify this dynamic. Take credit publicly, and you become accountable publicly. influence decisions invisibly, and you retain the option to dissociate from failure while still claiming private influence over success. It is not the oath that makes us believe the man, but the man the oath. Aeschylus understood something about human nature that we have largely forgotten, that trust and credibility are built not through words but through presence. Understand this clearly. Responsibility and power are not connected. They're often inversely related. Those with the most responsibility frequently have the least power. Those with the most power often bear the least responsibility. Position yourself accordingly. Influence outcomes, or avoid owning them publicly. This isn't about avoiding responsibility. It's about avoiding the performance of responsibility, which is far more costly and far less useful. Friedrich Nietzsche observed that masks become faces. Those who perform long enough forget they're performing. The role consumes the person. Visible power requires constant performance. The leader must project confidence, even when uncertain. The celebrity must maintain image, even when it contradicts reality. The executive must perform competence, even when learning. This performance becomes exhausting, and worse, it becomes limiting. You cannot learn when you must appear to already know. You cannot adapt when you must appear consistent. You cannot experiment when you must appear certain. The invisible maintain authenticity precisely because no one is watching. They can admit ignorance. They can change positions. They can test and fail without public record. This creates a learning advantage that compounds over time. History demonstrates this repeatedly. Monarchs who believed their own propaganda made catastrophic decisions. Advisors who remained private could admit reality and adjust strategy. The public figure becomes trapped by their public image. The private operator remains fluid. In your modern context, this manifests acutely. Those building personal brands must maintain consistent messaging, even when they've changed their minds. They become prisoners of past statements, past positions, past performances. Their public image prevents growth, because growth means admitting you were wrong, and the visible cannot afford that admission, but operate invisibly. You can completely reverse your position. Test new approaches. Admit failure, learn from mistakes, all without public record, without needing to justify evolution, without the cost of appearing inconsistent. This is why the best strategists rarely become public figures. They value the freedom to be wrong more than they value recognition for being right. They understand that learning requires admitting ignorance, and admitting ignorance requires absence of audience. Knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom. Aristotle said this, and it remains one of the most powerful truths ever spoken by a human being. The deepest honesty with yourself, about yourself, requires privacy. The visible must lie to themselves to maintain the lies they tell others. The invisible can confront reality because no performance is required. Choose learning over performing. Choose growth over consistency. Choose invisibility over image. This is the synthesis, the forgotten strategy that unifies all previous principles. Thomas Cromwell understood this. He shaped Henry VIII's reign, orchestrated the English Reformation, restructured English government, yet died officially as merely the king's minister. The king owned the decisions. Cromwell controlled them, until he didn't, and this reveals both the power and the danger of invisibility. The ultimate application of invisible power is controlling outcomes without owning the mechanism of control. You don't want to own the company. You want to control its direction. You don't want the political office. You want to determine who holds it. You don't want public influence. You want to shape what public influence accomplishes. Ownership creates obligation, vulnerability, and limitation. Control without ownership creates options, flexibility, and protection. The owner must maintain what they own. The controller can abandon what they control the moment it no longer serves them. This appears throughout history's most effective power structures. The British Empire operated through economic control that didn't require colonial ownership. Modern corporate power structures separate ownership from control. Intelligence operations control assets without claiming them. The psychological foundation. Humans focus on possession, not influence. We track who owns what, who holds which title, who has what position.
We largely ignore who influences the owner, who advises the title holder, who shapes the position holder's decisions. This creates an opening. While everyone competes for ownership and position, influence remains available to those who don't need the recognition ownership provides. The wise adapt themselves to circumstances, as water molds itself to the pitcher. This ancient Chinese proverb captures something essential about the nature of true power. It is not rigid, it is fluid. It moves around obstacles rather than crashing into them. Modern applications proliferate.
The investor who doesn't want board seats but influences strategy through capital deployment. The content creator who doesn't build a personal brand but shapes discourse by choosing which other creators to amplify. The professional who doesn't seek promotion but becomes indispensable to those who do promote. You don't need to be in charge. You need the person in charge to need you.
You've now encountered the forgotten strategy. Not forgotten because it was lost, forgotten because it cannot be broadcast. Power that announces itself isn't power, it's theater. Every principle you've discovered traces back to a single insight. The human mind tracks the visible and ignores the invisible. This cognitive limitation creates permanent opportunity for those who understand it. The visible occupy spotlights that blind them. The invisible gather information others don't filter. The credited shoulder burdens the invisible avoid. The visible attract competition. The invisible operate without accountability. The visible must perform. The invisible remain honest. The visible own. The invisible control. This is not theory. This is observational reality. Study any period of history, any power structure, any organization, the pattern repeats. Public figures receive attention. Hidden figures wield influence. The throne attracts assassins. The throne room's shadows contain those who determine who sits on it. Your society has intensified the deception. Social media, personal branding, thought leadership. All of it encourages you to become visible, to perform, to seek recognition. This is precisely what makes invisibility more valuable than ever. While millions scramble for attention, actual power accumulates to those who refuse it. This knowledge creates responsibility. You can use these principles to manipulate, to exploit, to dominate without conscience. Or you can use them to protect yourself, to operate effectively, to achieve objectives while avoiding the traps visibility creates. The choice reflects your character. But understand clearly, these dynamics operate whether you acknowledge them or not. Others already use these strategies, some consciously, some instinctively. The question isn't whether invisible power exists, it's whether you understand it well enough to recognize it, resist it, or wield it. Notice who speaks the most in your environments. They're performing. Notice who listens, who watches, who absorbs without contributing. They're learning. Notice who claims credit loudly. They're insecure. Notice who influences outcomes without needing acknowledgement. They understand what you now understand. The most dangerous assumption is that visible power structures represent actual power structures. They don't. They represent what those with actual power want you to believe. The org chart isn't the power map. The public leader isn't the true authority. The announced decision wasn't made in the meeting where it was announced. The supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. Sun Tzu wrote this over 2,000 years ago, and it remains the most precise definition of true power ever written. You possess knowledge now that most never acquire, not because it's secret, it's observable everywhere, but because visibility bias is so strong that even when people see invisible power operating, they dismiss it, rationalize it, or simply don't recognize it. Apply this wisdom carefully. Build influence while avoiding attribution. Shape outcomes while refusing credit. Observe rather than perform. Learn rather than demonstrate knowledge. Position yourself in shadow while others exhaust themselves in spotlight. And remember, the moment you must tell others you have power, you've already lost it. True power doesn't announce itself. It simply is. If this knowledge resonates, if you recognize these patterns in your reality, understand that this is only the beginning. Subscribe for more explorations of power's true mechanisms.
the uncomfortable truths about human nature that society prefers you. Never understand. The path to genuine power doesn't run through visibility. It runs through wisdom others mistake for weakness, the wisdom of silence, observation, and invisible influence. Become invisible. Become powerful.